What's happening, Try Life On family? This is Maurice. Welcome to another edition of the Try Life On podcast. We're going to talk with Paul Thompson today. Paul David Thompson. Interesting cat. And this is going to be more of a traditional real estate episode, but in the sense of trying life on, exiting the W-2, how Paul recognized he had a wake-up moment. You'll hear him talk about it, how his employer talked to him in a less than respectful way. And he realized that he needed to create his own personal economy and get out of the W-2 as fast as possible. So what he did is similar to what I did over my lifetime, which was store money, start buying property. He was leveraging hard money loans and any financing he could get to get his hands on good properties to the tune of a portfolio of over 40 properties. He's now out of the W-2 and he's moved on to apartment complex syndicating and some other things. But what I love about this conversation is that the entire time, his focus was on the ball of financial freedom for the purposes of taking care of his family, creating legacy, and living life as intended in his own way. And he kind of walks through that entire journey, leveraging real estate. I tell you guys all the time, real estate is not the end all be all, but it is a wonderful tool in the lifestyle design space to create the economy that you need to have the lifestyle that you want. So have a listen to my man, Paul Thompson. I think it's a great one. He talks about the value of mentors in it and the fact that when he created his financial freedom plan, he was laid off from 9 to 5, 2 to 3 years into that plan and had to pivot. I know a lot of you want to get out of the 9 to 5 in your own way. Nothing wrong with the 9 to 5, but sometimes we do want to go. Paul's a great example of how to get it done. Have a good listen to my man, Paul Thompson. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Try Life On podcast. I got my man, Paul Thompson, with me. Paul and I were just talking about the fact that he's in Arkansas, and I've never been to Arkansas ever at all in all my travels. But he's had this awesome, and Arkansas is great, I'm sure. He's had this awesome journey relative to trying life on through real estate, through realizations about his own life journey. So it's going to be an awesome show. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Maurice.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So why don't you, maybe you can just give a little background on who you are and how you got, I'm aware of your background story, we'll get there, but just a sense of who you are, where you came from, and what's happening with you now.
Yeah, so let's start with what's happening with me now. I have finally grown up and realized what I want to do with my life. And it took a while. And I had a bit of a journey where I grew up in an environment where I just didn't have a lot of access to means. Like I never went hungry. I was always safe. I was cared for and I was loved. So I was blessed and cherished in that way, but we were always barely making do. Right. And so I was the first person in my family to go and get a second degree education and graduate with a bachelor's degree. And when I did that, it pushed me up several rungs in the socioeconomic class. And it was a good thing. I was earning a good income and I had kind of achieved my goal. I was 22 years old and okay, now what? I guess I go get a job. And I got a job making, I think, $45,000 or something in the year 2000, which was a decent income, but it's not going to, set any records, right?
Yeah.
But it comfortably covered my lifestyle and I was a single guy. But I just kind of had this feeling of, I was looking at work, like I'm going to do this work thing for the next 40 years. And I thought, I guess so. I mean, I can't say I'm excited about it, but I can't think of an alternative. Like I didn't have any kind of business ideas. I didn't have any of that true entrepreneurial spirit that some people are born with. Yeah. And I was just kind of following life and I was probably doing the opposite of trying life on. I was just like following the status quo. Right. I'm like, okay. And about 15 years into that process, I realized that I had just been living somebody else's life. Basically, I was doing this corporate thing and I was climbing the corporate ladder. And I realized about 15 years into it, my ladder was against the wrong wall. And so I kind of reinvented myself, found real estate as a way to do so.
How did you find real estate? Like how, and I say this all the time, but real estate's just a tool, right? There's many tools out there that, hammers that can hit a nail. Why real estate and how does that pop up in your vision?
Yeah, it's a bridge, right? It gets you to a way to buy your time back. We've been trained to be employees and exchange an hour for $1.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to change that. I was really kind of irritated that I had allowed myself to get so comfortable that that's the way I lived. So I thought, well, what else could I do? Like I need to know, I need something that makes money while I sleep. I'd been investing in stocks, but I didn't see a path doing that would expedite the process. Like what I had invested in was in my 401k and my IRA. That's money that's difficult to get to without taxes and penalties until you're a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, what else can I do now, like in the next 3 to 5 years, that changes my life so that I don't have to go into the job?
What age were you when you started to have that thought process?
37. I was 37.
Oh, see, we're similar. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, mid to late 30s, had kids that were, at the time, like 4 and 7.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to miss their childhoods because I was so busy working. So I looked at some options. I thought maybe I could buy a franchise. I thought about going into becoming like an insurance agent, and everything that I looked into like that felt like I was buying myself another job. So I sure didn't want to do that. So I thought, well, what could I do that is residual, is an extra stream of income? And so I thought, well, I'll just buy a rental property and I'll just see if it works. Like it may not make sense, but that's an action that I can do, that I can control, right?
Yeah.
And then I started getting rent checks, and then I was hooked. And then I found out I was a deal junkie, and I just okay, like I can go and buy a little asset for 20, 30, maybe 40% below its value, and fix it up and rent it and refi and get all my money back out and then do it again. And so I did that for the next 2 or 3 years. And I think by the time, I think 2 years into the process, I had something like 25 rental properties here in Little Rock where I live. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the foundation for cash flow that it basically bought my lifestyle back.
Awesome. What kind of property did you start buying? Single family. And where did you get the knowledge to do it? Was it a mentor? Was it books? What gave you the sense to do it?
So I hadn't heard of Bigger Pockets, but I did a Google search. Pretty quickly you find Bigger Pockets. Yeah, it's a good resource.
Definitely.
And it actually, 2 years or so later, into my process, I was interviewed on Bigger Pockets, and it was so surreal to talk to Brandon Turner and David Green, because those are the guys that I had been listening to for the last couple of years, learning about about how to go about this real estate thing, right? Yeah. And so I also went to a lot of conferences. I read a bunch of books, listened to a lot of podcasts, and one of the coolest things I did, one of the pieces of advice that I got was, go find a mentor. And how do you find a mentor? Like that's a complicated conversation. So I went online and I looked in my area trying to find somebody who was in real estate in my state, but not in my city, so that I could talk to him about the market, but not be a competitor. So I found somebody who was about an hour away in a small city of Hot Springs that was doing real estate, single family. He had a website, and I found his number or his email, emailed him, not really sure. He called me back from this email that I sent, I think it was. And he said, yeah, I'll mentor you, but here's the catch. You have to buy this book, The Richest Man of Babylon.
Oh,
you have to, which is a really great book, or a fundamental book, right? Very short read, but full of principles. And you have to write a handwritten 3-page essay of what that means to you. And I want you to underline and highlight the things in the book that make sense to you. And then I want you to mail that book that you've highlighted and read and your 3-page paper to me. And that's when I know you're serious.
Wow.
And that was like his thing. So that was like this Mr. Miyagi moment where it's like, okay, I'll give it a go. I'll wax on and wax off.
Why do you think he did that? Was he trying to see what your why was, and your motivations behind things?
It was his filter for, the looky-loos that come by and say, I want mentorship, but don't want to put anything into it. They just want to take and not give back, or at least contribute to themselves. And one of the best pieces of advice that he gave me, as I ended up reading and writing 8 or 9 books and papers for him over the following 2 or 3 years. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave me, he says, go to these conferences. They're in like Tampa and Atlanta. And they're by these grand old men of real estate that, it's like $300-400. They're terrible at marketing, but they just fill these weekends full of knowledge. And I did. I went to probably 10 of those over the next 3 to 4 years. And, probably spent $30,000 total of travel time and expenses, but I felt like I got a master class in real estate in those short years because I was just absorbing everything I would learn on those weekends. And I would go back to my market and try it out.
Yep. The funny thing is, so that's one thing we talk about on the podcast a lot, or just on social media, the fact that people won't pay for self-education, but they'll pay $50,000 towards a degree. But you're espousing that self-education is part of what has propelled you forward into a life that you want.
Absolutely. I feel very confident in my competence because I have done the study, I have done the work, and I've really spent some time thinking about the implications of the variety of strategies in real estate. And, some make a lot of sense. Some are a little bit, don't make sense. Some I'm just not good at. I don't have the personality for. Right. Yeah. And so sometimes you kind of figure out the theory is great, but my application of it is terrible. And I'm a terrible property manager and I should not be doing that. You learn these things, right? So you learn what your areas of competence are. And when it comes to the theory and understanding of real estate, I feel that I'm as competent and an expert level as anybody I've ever talked to.
Right on. What were you doing for regular work before you started on the real estate? And then when did you punch out of regular work?
Good question. So I was a engineer. I got a computer engineering degree from the University of Arkansas, and I got a job kind of being a computer guy. I worked for an internet service provider, and we made the internet possible in our little neck of the woods. So actually not that bad of a job. The work was interesting because it was kind of on the cutting edge of what was happening in the world. I enjoyed that part of it, but I hated the corporate politics. And once I started going up the management levels, I realized very quickly that the only way I was ever going to become wealthy in that was, and that discipline would be to go way up the ladder, get a C-level type job. And that probably wasn't in the cards. And 2 years into my 3-year strategy of exiting, I was actually laid off. And
wow,
it's kind of the craziest thing. I was a like middle manager and I had employees, and I'd had to lay people off before. And so it was one of those things where it's like the likelihood of that happening, I thought was pretty high. And I was a single income family because my wife stays at home and it doesn't work. And so I was vulnerable, and I knew if I wanted to replace that job in the same industry, I'd probably have to move, and we weren't interested in moving. So that was another reason that we really needed to make a change so that I could control my environment and live where I wanted to and be around the people I wanted to, but also maintain the lifestyle that we'd gotten used to.
Gotcha. You mentioned getting laid off 2 to 3 years into the plan. Can you talk about that a little bit? So in my journey, when I post on LinkedIn, I have a 10-step plan. It's my why: take money from my paycheck, store it, build up enough in storage. When you have enough money to buy an asset, you buy the asset. If it cash flows, take the cash flow, add it to your paycheck, do it again, et cetera, et cetera. What was your plan? And was it really well thought out? Was it, look, man, I'm just going to go for it and just try this and course correct? Because I feel like you're going to understand what I'm saying. I think that people, when they try and create a financial freedom plan or some relative path to leave the status quo, they don't do it because they don't feel that it's perfect. It needs to be perfect before I start and take a risk. Maybe you can talk about the plan itself. Was it perfect? How you came up with it, et cetera.
Yeah. So it was a little bit of both. It was a plan, and it was also go for it. It was a combination of both. I'd spent 15 years not going for it. I'd spent 15 years on the sidelines, not in the game. And I realized, well, God damn it. Like I need to be in the game, I need to be out there on the field, figuring out what it means to actually own assets, to own a little business, and to understand the ins and outs of running a small business. So I thought, okay, well, real estate's my thing, and my experiment is going to be, I'm going to go buy rental properties, and if they, if I wanted to replace my living expenses of say $10,000 per month, which would comfortably cover my living expenses and probably a little extra, then I needed so many rental properties that, had $250 of cash flow per month. That works out to be about 40 properties. So that was kind of like my goal, right? It was to get to 40 properties. The first time I ran it, I realized that it was $100 per unit per door that I wanted to make. And then I realized I needed 100 doors. I was like, well, that seems like a lot of properties. So I adjusted my plan a little bit along the way and started underwriting a little more strictly, and would buy things that I felt comfortable would cash flow $250 per door. And $250 per door. Yeah, which is hard to find. I mean, so you have to work hard to find deals at that discount. Right. Definitely. Yeah. Right. But I'd much rather own 40 properties that cash flow at $250 a piece than 100 properties that cash flow at 100. Right.
So right. So you kind of course corrected and set your goals to $250 a door. My assumption is you were just using paychecks from work to fund what it is that you were doing.
Good question. So I had about 50 grand of liquidity that I could play with. Yeah. So I'd saved up some cash, and I would just reuse that capital over again, doing the BRRRR method. So I would find a deal, a property, say, is worth, in my market at the time, it was worth 70 grand, but I'd be able to buy it for, say, 40 grand. Mm-hmm. And it needed $10,000 of work, for example. So what I would do is I would find a private money lender that I found through BiggerPockets that lived near me. And she had like $1 million that she was going to lend out to investors, because she'd retired and she was, chill, and she was going to lend money. Right. Mm-hmm. And she still does that today, by the way. But so she would lend me like 50 grand on a property. So I would buy the whole thing with her 50 grand or 40 grand in this example. And then I would put my 10 and rehab into it, get it rehabbed. And then I would refinance it and pull most, if not all, of my money back out. Okay. And pay her back, replenish my stock of cash, and then do it again. And I would just do that over and over and over again. And I think for a while there, I was buying somewhere in the order of one deal a month on average. Just buying a deal and just turning that.
But you were buying one deal per month, but you were playing the long game. I mean, you knew this was going to be a long-term pursuit.
Yeah.
What has happened? Actually, just from a time perspective, can you give folks listening just like, when did you start, and then how many years have you owned these things?
So I started in 2015, and we're recording in the summer of 2023 now. So I spent 8 years into it. And I think I bought my first property in August of 2015. So I'm coming up on my 8th year anniversary, I guess, being a real estate investor, with having never bought anything but my personal residence prior to that. I mean, I didn't really even know what escrow was when I first started. So, I was green, but I had some business acumen because I'd been in middle management, and I had good credit, and I had a little bit of cash. I mean, not a lot, but I had enough to make a dent, so to speak. So the kind of the arc and the timeline there was 2015. I started, and I was probably kind of that summer is when I was like, I had this like moment. It's like, I got to make this change. And so I just went at it. And so by the end of that summer, I closed on my first property. And then I think by that year, I had 8 properties, which I kind of took a break, make sure I kind of had my head around me. And then I started buying again. And the first 10 properties I bought were from wholesalers. So somebody else was sourcing the deal, and I was buying it, and they're making a little piece of it. Right. Well, then I realized pretty early on that if I want to do this at scale, that I'm going to have to be the guy to source deals so that I can control the deal and do more deals myself. Right. And so I effectively started learning the marketing angle of being a wholesaler, even though I was buying it myself. Yeah.
I got you. So it's been 8 years. In general, are they cash flowing $250 a door? Have you paid any off? Mm-hmm. Like, what I'm just trying to give people. So in my journey, so what I did, very different time, and I was in a very different market, DC. So things rapidly appreciated for a very long time. So I bought 35 single family homes, mostly condos.
Yep.
A bunch of them appreciated. I sold them. I paid off the other ones, and I ended up with 18 paid off places in the DC market. So it's like 160 grand of passive. And this was 2014. So you can imagine the rents have gone up over time and stuff like that. I still, even though I do large apartment complexes now, I actually still live off that.
Same.
I never cashed it in or went for something bigger. I was like, life is secure. But maybe you can just give a sense. I want people to have a sense of realism. You did that for 8 years. You got to a certain number. How are they performing for you now, 8 years later?
Good questions, because this is the way you want to think about your portfolio as you start building. If you get into real estate, I mean, you become a portfolio manager. And so I keep a list of all my properties. And right now I have about 40 single family. And I'm the same way. I'm doing bigger projects now, but I live off of my base. Of my 40 or so rentals in my backyard, because I know the market. When there's a deal, I can find it, and I know it's a deal. Whereas someplace further afield, I don't know the market as well. It's hard for me to know. So, and this is like my safe place where I know the market. I'm in tune with things, and I keep about 40 properties. And every year or so, I look through my list of properties, and I shoot my least favorite property. For whatever reason, you do these pro formas, and it's going to be $200 or $250 a month in cash flow. But then you actually see the cash flow over a year or two, and you realize, oh, this one's done really well, or this one's done very poorly. And sometimes it's because of the house itself. Sometimes it's the neighborhood. Sometimes it's just, for whatever reason, you can't find good, consistent tenants. Things happen. And so you stack rank, or at least I do. I stack rank my properties from least favorite to most favorite. And the ones at the bottom, I never want to sell. They're my gems. Great cash flow, great equity, great neighborhoods. I don't want to sell those. But then I have some at the top. You're like, this, for whatever reason, I have equity in this property. It has $20,000-$30,000 of equity, but it just doesn't do anything. I feel like I'm always having to fuss with it. Let's sell that one and cash out that one, and take that cash, redeploy it into something else that I think will perform better.
Yeah. And, I'll give an example of that. Although I am very partial to all those properties that I bought kind of in my original journey from 02 to 2000. You get a little bit sentimental with them and stuff. You do. There's one particular one in Baltimore, Maryland that it's all paid off now. It's probably worth like 85 grand. It does cash flow, but the taxes in Baltimore are really high. Yeah. So in total, it probably, assuming there's no major repair, and I've had that with the HVAC, it makes like $3,500 for the year. So not a ton. Right. And now I'm like, I should probably sell it. Because that capital is just kind of sitting there, not performing. But those are some of the beautiful issues you run into where you can make a choice. So if you have this portfolio, talk about how it's like the realism of that portfolio against your life. Meaning you don't have a W-2. How do you support your wife? What is day-to-day like? How do you think about the cash flow coming in versus your expenses versus your need to want to grow in other areas? What's it like on a day-to-day for you and family Thompson?
Yeah, so I'm super busy. I do a lot of things, but I have, what I consider level 1 financial independence, meaning that I have these set of not sexy assets here in Little Rock, Arkansas that pay my lifestyle. So I'm able to pretty comfortably cover my monthly expenses of $10,000 and be comfortable there, have cash flow. And, I don't think about my personal money that much, because I just have this kind of consistent drop of income that comes in from these rental properties. And I will say, I also have 3 of them I've turned into Airbnbs that help juice the returns.
There you go.
So that helps, right? Yeah. And so, I was my income or my lifestyle kind of crept a little bit, and I was like, I don't really want to own another 10 or 20 rental properties, and it's getting hard to buy properties right now. So I thought, well, let's do an experiment. Let's take 3 of these and convert them into what I call midterm rentals for like traveling nurses. So it's like a nice, I market them on Airbnb, but I make the income closer to what you might do with like a furnished house. So it's like a happy medium between the two of long-term and short-term. So that helps kind of juice my returns and get a little bit more cash flow in my life. And then I spend my time and energy on these big projects where I do land development, and I run a mastermind, and I'm, doing this marketing thing, which you and I both are in this world of, we've put ourselves out there as thought leaders or influencers or whatever you want to call us, right?
Yeah.
We're sharing our opinions, and we, in that process, attract people that we help. Some of those it's a transaction where they're paying for our time and interest and knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So I have that part of my business that I would consider pretty nascent, pretty new, and I'm learning how to be that kind of guy. Whereas I'm very comfortable being a real estate guy, but it's boring. I mean, there's nothing to do over there. Like, there's nothing.
You have to learn
at all.
You got to learn.
Yeah. So I'm learning this newer side of the business of where I'm, figuring out what it takes to make a social media video that people actually watch, and hosting webinars, and I have events and do masterminds. So that's where I spend my time and energy now, in addition to being a GP on my own projects and being an LP on certain projects I invest in.
Yep, I got that. So let's talk about that. People won't know what GPLP is off the top, but I just before we go there, I just want to make a point for people. You talked about the real estate stuff is kind of boring because you've got it under control and you know what you're doing, and there's not a lot to learn there. My journey from 02 to 15, when I hit 14, when I hit 2015, I realized I had created my own entrepreneurial rat race.
Yes.
I was pressing repeat on my single family methodology.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have a rat race on the entrepreneur side because you're just pressing repeat. You're doing the same thing. It's the same thing as being in corporate and feeling like you're taking the metro, eating Subway sandwich, come home, all that type of stuff. So I shifted into multifamily syndication and buying my own multifamily stuff. Yep. And I tell people it wasn't to make more money necessarily as much as it was I needed to learn something new.
Yes.
I just wasn't growing as a person.
You need a challenge.
Yeah, I sense that's what's coming from you. But what's been the next step for you after doing the single family? And I know you're probably still going to do single family here and there, but what's been the next step for you?
Yeah, the way I approach single family is if one lands in my lap, that just makes a lot of sense, I'll buy it. Otherwise, I don't really think about single family very much anymore because there's just no challenge to it. There's just no interest to it, no intrigue at all.
Yeah.
However, what I did step into is like, well, I've built my phase 1 or level 1 financial independence. Now I want to build wealth where I can have the option to live a more luxurious lifestyle on occasion when I want to.
Right.
Like if I want to go to Greece, then I go to Greece, right? Or Italy or wherever I want to go. And my kids are in school still, and they're getting a little bit older, and they're going to graduate from the next 3 to 6 years, and they're going to be out. And so during that time, I prioritize when they are home to be with them. But when they're not at home and they're not around, they're at school or they're at friend's house, whatever, then I work. And that's when I'm spending my time and energy working on things that are new to me, which is becoming a fund manager and being a syndicator where I'm managing projects as a general partner GP.
Got you. And are you doing what size deals are you doing, and how do people find you to even get involved as an LP?
Sure. So I have a fund that is a passive income fund where I am a lender from that, or that fund is a lender, and it's called One Call Capital. And the best place to find that is, I'll send you the links. You can add the show notes, but it's onecallcapital.com. And it's a 506c for accredited investors, so I can publicly talk about it. And then on a per case basis, when I come across a deal in Dallas, Texas, which is where my business partner lives, and a market that I'm very bullish on, is that we look for projects and we invest in multifamily, RV parks, that sort of thing in the North Texas area. And I have found that, all the research I've done, it is one of the best markets to be investing in. And just this idea of investing in where people live is something that I'm really big on, because you don't really know that much in the scheme of things once you get your head around it. And it's a growing market with a growing demand.
So you're primarily focused in Dallas, so you're not doing stuff like all over the U.S. That's your primary. That's the focus.
No. Now I'll invest as an LP, through my IRA or something, into a market that I believe in, and a syndicator that I believe in, wherever it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'll do my due diligence. But when I'm the GP and I'm running the operations, when I'm the general partner, and I'm the one signing on a loan, I want to be in a market where I have a network and I know people.
Where you know people, yeah. And I'm curious. we've had a similar path going into syndications with apartment complexes and what have you. When your single family journey hasn't ended, but you needed a shift, did anything else come to mind? Did you think about going back to the W-2? Did you think about opening a restaurant or a franchise or
Good
anything?
question.
Yeah, like why real estate stuck because I was in those spaces. Yeah, but why double down on the real estate? Right. Yeah.
Because a lot of the knowledge ports, I mean, not all of it, but a lot of the knowledge ports. In fact, just this morning on the mastermind, we were having a conversation about what principles you can take from single family to the commercial space. And one of those lessons that we learned is that the people who are selling, they still have a problem. And their problem isn't necessarily the same thing you come across in a single family, which is, I need the money so desperately, I have to get out of here. I'm going to file bankruptcy. That's typically not what you're dealing with in the commercial space. It happens occasionally, but that's usually not the case. Most commercial transactions and people who are a seller of a commercial property, they have cash, they have money, they have assets, they've figured this world out, but their life has changed. And just because there's more zeros at the end doesn't mean that you don't still use the same negotiating principles with people. And so one of the members of a mastermind was actually sharing how they were going to go into an industrial project, and they said, I was just like, it just isn't the right deal. I'm just going to tell the seller I'm going to back off. And the seller said, hold up, what do we need to do? Because I'm ready to close. And so they were able to get a $100,000 discount by being willing to back away. So the principles of negotiation are the same, in that when you're willing to walk away and you don't need the deal, then you have the most power. And they were able to get a huge discount on a good deal that now became a great deal because of the discount. See, and that's the stuff that I think is fun to, that's the game of real estate. It's like playing real world Monopoly, and I just can't help myself. I just keep going back to it. So that's why I went in that direction. I did consider a few other things, and I can't help but talk about real estate all the time. And people ask to pick my brain all the time. I was like, well, if people don't pick my brain, how about we just start a membership and we talk about real estate all day. I love it.
Yeah. So you're doing, that's effectively your mastermind. You're bringing a bunch of people together to have conversations on the topic and what have you.
Yeah. Interesting people. The same reason I do a podcast is I want to talk to interesting people about interesting subjects.
That's awesome.
And that's fun to me. Right. And the idea of for me, I'm having to learn what it takes to be the kind of personality that attracts attention on social media. That does not come naturally to me. But getting me in front of a room of people who are curious about real estate, I can hold the room for a long time and really enjoy myself.
Yeah, man. You lean on what your gift is, and if you're providing value to people, you should charge for it. Your time is valuable, especially for everything you went through. Just as the last 2 points, can you talk a bit about My Freedom Foundry and what that is and how you're helping people with it?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just got through rebranding that. We have a common interest to help probably come up with your tagline, and mine has changed to the Wake Up Call. And so I've rebranded from My Freedom Foundry, which is still a community that I have that's free, but now I have a Wake Up Call podcast, and it's this moment that I had when I was on this beach vacation. And it was my moment that I realized I've just been playing this game all wrong. I wanted to extend a vacation, and I had the money to do so. I had the time to do so. My wife wasn't working. My kids were out of school. And I worked for an internet company that allowed that made the technology possible for me to work remote. I said, hey, I'm just going to stay at the beach house and work remote, and I'll still work normal hours, but the kids will be at the beach. Just want to make sure there's no problem with that. Anything is he's like, what are you talking about? We don't do that here. Get your ass back to work. I expect to see you here Monday at 8.
Yeah.
Wasn't even a conversation. What is it? It wasn't even like, what's going on? Like, how can we make this work? It was like, I don't really care who or what you are. You're going to be in this butt in seat Monday at 8 o'clock. Wow. It's like, okay.
That's a wake up call.
That's a wake up call. It's like, I'm a slave. I'm a wage slave. I need that job more than they need me. And they clearly don't care about me. I was like, I have to build a personal economy so that I can take care of me and my family, and I can spend time with my family, because that's really what I'm doing all this for, is so that I can provide for my family and be around the people I love. I mean, like, why else are you working, right? It was like, is not to it's not just to earn income to make ends meet. Like that's an unfortunate reality that I think we're all taught in the status quo, and most of us are not trying life on and seeing what we can make and find a way to operate within our zone of genius, where our work is in line with our values.
I love the fact you talk about zone of genius, because everybody has one. Yeah, it's somewhere. You just have to identify it, and everybody does, or most people have a wake-up call. Now, here's the thing: people have a wake-up call, and like you, they will act on it. Or people have a wake-up call, and like many, they'll just ignore it. And they'll go right back to status quo, which is really unfortunate, because the phrase you said is very powerful, and I hope people pick up on it. We all have the ability to create our own personal economy, especially with tools like LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. Consumer to consumer is very real now. Yeah. Right. So yes, I'm doing big real estate deals. Forget that. Who cares? What I'm doing more so is I'm now coaching on lifestyle design and real estate investing and what have you through my Try Life On platform. And I can go direct to people who need my help, because I am putting out in social media world. I'm actually pretty good at it, putting out in social media world what my personal zone of genius is, and it will attract the right people that I can work with. That is not unique to me. You can, Paul, you're doing it in your own way now with your new platform. Other people can do it. And I guess what I'm trying to get across at this point, you and I are the same in that we came from corporate. We were told corporate was the way to go. That's what we have to do or whatever. But I'm telling you, and Paul is a great example of it, you can create your own personal economy where you are totally in control. And it does not have to be real estate. It could be many things. It could be a solopreneur. You could design a digital course. You can open a business, etc. So I just wanted to highlight the goodness that you just articulated there.
The principle there that you so eloquently stated is you want to create ownership. You want to have ownership of equity in something, whether it's something that you're buying its stocks into another company so that they're doing the work, but you're the effectively the limited partner, or you create or build equity by starting your own business. Real estate is just another form of business, right? So it is fundamentally, and so I think you and I both, we're not religious or dogmatic at all about the asset class. There's lots of asset classes out there. You want a big piece of some asset class so that you can control your life and create a lifestyle and create an income that comfortably covers that lifestyle, so that you don't have to exchange your time for money, because the famous Warren Buffett has said so clearly that if you never make money while you sleep, you never retire.
You'll never retire. So that's very true.
Right. So, and you and I guess technically are retired, but we're not retired. We're like the idea of retirement is so old-fashioned and outdated and outmoded. No one really wants to retire. When they get there, they lose purpose in life. We want something to sink our teeth into, but wouldn't it be great if you could sink your teeth into something and do it for the joy of it and not for the value dollar that was given to you because of it? Yeah, that's interesting. That's trying life on, and that's having a life full of purpose and meaning and joy.
And listen, if anything, folks should go back and rewind what you just said and listen to it again, because you just articulated the outcome of what real estate can do, the outcome of what taking a leap of faith can do. So you can go try life on your way, whether it's down with Paul in Arkansas or with me on the other side of the planet where I tend to be in the Mediterranean or what have you. This is not a money game. This is a life game. Yeah. And I sometimes people don't see that. They just kind of go the Instagram path of things and they go after the millions or what have you. What's so powerful about you is that you recognize that it's a lifestyle thing from the beginning. It's being able to control where you are, what you do, who you're with. I just think it's a beautiful thing, man. How do people find you if they want to engage with your platform, learn more about real estate investing in general?
The best way to find me is on my website, pauldavidthompson.com, spelled the way you would think those common names are spelled. I have the curse of a common name, so I used all three of them, pauldavidthompson.com, and I'll make sure and send you those links so you can put them in the show notes.
Awesome. Well, Paul David Thompson, I appreciate you coming on the Try Life On podcast, man. You've had a hell of a journey. I know it's going to continue, but I really love the fact that you're giving back to community by setting up these platforms and sharing unselfishly. That's the key, man, is helping other people come up So thank you for coming on the podcast, and thank you for educating my listeners. And hopefully I'll come on yours and we'll share again.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Man. Thanks so much. Hey guys, this is Maurice, host of the Try Life On podcast, and thank you for listening to another episode. I hope you are finding it useful in helping you design your own lifestyle that you don't need a vacation from. If that's the case, please consider dropping a review for me, whether in Apple, iTunes, or in Spotify. Drop a review, put some stars on it, give me some feedback on how I can make the podcast better, what information you are looking for. I am doing my best to get information to you on the Try Life On principles, the 5 freedoms, how to build lifestyle, travel hacking, all of it. And I want to do it for you. So please do a review for me. And until next time, my name is Maurice Philogene, and this is the Try Life On podcast. Peace.